The sun beat down mercilessly on Hannah Miller's back as she struggled with the plow handles. Her worn cotton dress, already soaked through with sweat, despite the early morning hour. The old mule pulling her plow seemed as stubborn as the dry Arizona soil itself, stopping every few feet to shake his head and snicker in protest. It was 1876, and she had been trying to work this field outside Republic, Arizona for 3 days now, making little progress on land that should have taken a day at most to prepare for planting. Her husband Samuel had been dead for 4 months, taken by a fever that swept through their small homestead like wildfire. He left her with 40 acres, a rickety cabin, 3 chickens, 1 contrary mule, and debts that mounted higher each week. The bank had given her until harvest time to prove she could work the land herself, or they would take everything. She was 22 years old and had never plowed a field alone in her life. Hannah wiped her forehead with the back of her hand, leaving a streak of dirt across her sun-reddened face. Her palms were raw and bleeding through the thin work gloves she had fashioned from old flour sacks. The blisters had formed on the first day and burst on the second. Now she was working with open wounds that screamed with every movement, but she could not afford to stop. She heard hoofbeats approaching, but did not turn around. Probably another neighbor coming to tell her she should give up and move back east where she came from. She had heard it all before. A woman alone could not make it out here. A woman alone was not strong enough. A woman alone would only bring trouble. "That plow's sitting too deep," a man's voice said from somewhere behind her. "You are tearing up the soil instead of turning it." Hannah straightened up slowly, one hand going to her aching lower back. She turned to see a man sitting astride a painted horse, watching her with an expression that was neither mocking nor pitying, just observant. He was tall even sitting down, with broad shoulders and sun-darkened skin that spoke of years working outdoors. His dark hair curled slightly at his collar, and his eyes were a striking shade of hazel that seemed to change color in the bright sunlight. He looked to be in his mid-20s, perhaps 26 or 27. "I know what I am doing," Hannah said, though they both knew it was a lie. The man dismounted in one fluid motion and walked toward her, moving with the easy confidence of someone comfortable in his own skin. "No, you do not," he said simply. "But that is nothing to be ashamed of. Plowing is a skill like any other. Takes time to learn." He stopped a few feet away from her, close enough that she could see the dust on his leather vest and the worn places on his denim pants. His boots were scuffed but well made, and a coiled rope hung from his saddle. A working cowboy, then, not a drifter or troublemaker. "I am Yates Olson," he said, touching the brim of his hat. "I work at the Running Creek Ranch about 5 miles south of here. Been riding past your place the last few days, watching you fight with this field." "Then you have had your entertainment," Hannah said, turning back to her plow. "I need to keep working." "Wait," Yates said, and something in his voice made her pause. "Let me help you." Hannah shook her head. "I cannot pay you. Did I ask for payment?" "Why would you help me then?" She turned to face him again, suspicion clear in her brown eyes. "What do you want?" Yates was quiet for a moment, studying her face with an intensity that made her want to look away. "I watched my mother try to work our farm alone after my father died," he said finally. "She was too proud to ask for help, too stubborn to admit she needed it. She worked herself into an early grave trying to prove she could do it all. I was only 15, too young to stop her, too foolish to understand what she was doing to herself until it was too late." There was real pain in his voice, old grief that had settled into something heavy and permanent. Hannah felt her defenses soften slightly. "I am sorry for your loss," she said quietly. "It was 11 years ago," Yates said, "but I still remember, And I still wish someone had stepped in to help her, to share the burden so she did not have to carry it alone. He gestured toward the field. Let me finish this for you. Please. Hannah wanted to refuse. She had been raised to be self-sufficient, to never accept charity, to earn everything she received. But her hands hurt so badly she could barely close them, and the field stretched out before her like an impossible challenge. She had maybe finished a third of it in 3 days. At this rate, she would never get the planting done in time. Just the plowing, she heard herself say. I can handle the rest. Something that might have been a smile crossed Yates's face. Just the plowing, he agreed. He moved to the plow and adjusted the depth with practiced hands, then checked the harness on the mule. The old animal seemed to sense a more experienced handler and settled down immediately. Yates picked up the handles and called out to the mule, and they began moving forward in a smooth, straight line. Hannah watched as he worked, mesmerized by the efficiency of his movements. The plow cut through the soil cleanly now, turning it in neat furrows that would be perfect for planting. He made it look effortless, though she could see the muscles working in his forearms and the concentration on his face. She went to the well and drew up a bucket of cool water, then poured some into a tin cup. When Yates reached the end of a row and turned to start another, she walked out to meet him. You should drink something, she said, holding out the cup. He took it with a nod of thanks and drained it in a few long swallows. A drop of water escaped and ran down his chin, and Hannah found herself watching its path before quickly looking away. You have a good well, Yates said, handing the cup back to her. Water's sweet and cold. It is one of the few things Samuel did right before he died, Hannah said, then immediately regretted the bitterness in her voice. Yates did not comment on it. He just returned to the plow and continued working. Hannah went back to the shade of the cabin's small porch and sat down to watch. She should probably be doing something productive, but exhaustion had caught up with her now that she had stopped moving. Her whole body ached, and the cuts on her hands throbbed with each heartbeat. She must have dozed off because the next thing she knew, the sun had moved significantly across the sky and Yates was walking toward her. She jerked awake and stood up quickly, embarrassed. I am sorry, she stammered. I did not mean to fall asleep while you worked. You needed the rest, Yates said. The field is done. Your mule is in the pen with fresh water. I took the liberty of fixing a board that was coming loose. Hannah looked out at the field and felt her throat tighten. It was completely plowed, neat rows waiting for seed. 3 days of struggle finished in a handful of hours. I do not know how to thank you, she said. Yates stood there on her porch, close enough that she could smell the clean sweat on him and see the flecks of gold in his hazel eyes. He opened his mouth, closed it, then seemed to steel himself for something. Marry me tomorrow, he said. Hannah stared at him, certain she had misheard. What? Marry me tomorrow? Yates repeated, his voice steady despite the wild proposal. I know it sounds crazy, I know we just met. But I have been riding past your place for weeks, ever since your husband died. I have been watching you struggle and wanting to help but not knowing how to approach you. Today, I finally worked up the courage. You cannot be serious, Hannah said, taking a step back. I am completely serious. Yates held up his hands, showing he meant no threat. Listen to me. You need help with this land. The bank will take it if you cannot prove you can work it. You cannot work 40 acres alone, no matter how strong or determined you are. I can help you keep this place. So you want to marry me for my land? Hannah felt anger flare hot in her chest. No, Yates said firmly. I want to marry you because I have never seen anyone fight as hard as you have been fighting. I want to marry you because you did not give up even when you should have. I want to marry you because when I saw you out here this morning, covered in dirt and bleeding through your gloves, still refusing to quit, I thought you were the bravest person I have ever seen. Hannah felt tears prick at her eyes and blinked them back furiously. "You do not know anything about me." "Then let me learn," Yates said softly. "We can have a long engagement if you want, court properly, but marry me tomorrow legally so the bank cannot take this place. Give us both a chance." "Why?" Hannah asked. "Why would you tie yourself to a widow with nothing? You could have any woman in the territory." "I do not want any woman," Yates said. "I want a partner. I want someone who knows what hard work means. I want someone who does not give up when things get difficult." He paused. "And if I am being honest, I have been lonely for a long time. Working cattle, drifting from ranch to ranch. I want to build something that matters. This could be it." Hannah shook her head, overwhelmed. "This is insane." "Probably," Yates agreed, "but that does not make it wrong." He stepped off the porch and walked to his horse. For a moment, Hannah thought he was simply leaving, and she felt an unexpected pang of disappointment. But he just reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a small cloth bundle. "I brought food," he said, coming back to the porch. "Figured you probably have not been eating much, focused on the field as you were. Just some bread and cheese and dried apples. Nothing fancy." He set the bundle on the porch railing and mounted his horse in one smooth motion. "Think about what I said. I will come back tomorrow morning for your answer. If you say yes, I will take you to see Judge Morrison in town and we will make it legal. If you say no, I will respect that, but I will still help you work this land as a neighbor. You will not be alone either way." He touched his hat brim again and turned his horse toward the road. Hannah watched him ride away, her mind spinning with confusion and possibility and fear. That night, she lay awake in the cabin that suddenly felt too empty. Samuel had not been a bad husband, but he had not been a particularly good one either. He was 15 years older than her, chosen by her father more for his homestead claim than any romantic notion. She had done her wifely duties without complaint, but she had never felt the kind of passion the dime novels she secretly read sometimes described. Samuel had died and she had grieved, but if she was honest with herself, she had grieved more for the security she lost than the man himself. That made her feel guilty, but it was the truth. Now this stranger, this cowboy named Yates Olson, had plowed her field and proposed marriage in the same afternoon. It was madness. It was impossible. It was also the most romantic thing that had ever happened to her. But was romance enough reason to marry someone? Could she trust a man she had just met? What if he turned cruel once they were legally bound? What if he drank or gambled or had debts of his own? On the other hand, what choice did she really have? She could not work this land alone. The bank would take it, and she would be left with nothing. She could try to find work in town, but there were few respectable jobs for women and even fewer that paid enough to live on. She could write to her family back in Ohio and beg them to take her in, returning as a failure after insisting she could make a life out west. Or she could take a chance on the cowboy with the kind eyes and the sad story about his mother. Hannah got out of bed and lit a candle. She went to the small trunk where she kept her few precious possessions and pulled out the daguerreotype of her parents taken on their wedding day. Her mother looked so young and uncertain, her father stern and proper. It had been an arranged marriage like so many others, and they had built a solid if unexciting life together. Maybe that was all marriage was supposed to be. Not passion or romance, but partnership and practicality. If she looked at it that way, Yates's proposal made perfect sense. He needed a home and she needed help. They could build something together. She thought about the way he had looked at her when he talked about her bravery. No one had ever looked at her like that before, like she mattered, like she was more than just a pair of hands to do work or a body to bear children. By the time the sun rose, Hannah had made her decision. She washed as best she could with water from the basin and put on her one good dress, a blue calico that had been her Sunday best. It was faded and had been mended several times, but it was clean and modest. She brushed out her dark hair and pinned it up carefully, then studied herself in the small cracked mirror hanging on the wall. She looked tired and thin, her face more angular than it should be from not eating enough. But her brown eyes were clear and determined. If she was going to do this, she would do it with her head held high. Yates arrived mid-morning, riding the same painted horse. This time he wore a clean shirt and had shaved the stubble from his jaw. He looked nervous as he dismounted, holding his hat in his hands. "Good morning," he said. "Good morning," Hannah replied. She took a deep breath. "My answer is yes." She saw relief and something else flash across his face. Joy maybe, or hope. "You are sure?" "I am sure," Hannah said with more confidence than she felt. "But I have conditions." "Name them," Yates said immediately. "This land stays in my name," Hannah said. "I know legally it will become yours when we marry, but I want a written agreement that you will not sell it or mortgage it without my consent." Yates nodded. "Agreed. What else?" "I want separate beds for now," Hannah continued, her cheeks flushing. "Until we know each other better. I will be your wife in name and in public, but in private I need time." "That is more than fair," Yates said quietly. "I would not expect otherwise. Anything else?" Hannah thought for a moment. "If this does not work, if we find we cannot stand each other, I want the option to end it. I know divorce is scandalous, but I will not be trapped in a miserable marriage." "I pray it will not come to that," Yates said. "But if you want to leave, I will not stop you. You will keep the land and I will go." He held out his hand. "Do we have an agreement?" Hannah looked at his extended hand, calloused and strong, offering her a lifeline or possibly a noose. She put her hand in his and felt his fingers close around hers, warm and solid. "We have an agreement," she said. They rode together into Republic, Hannah sitting behind Yates on his horse since her mule was far too slow for the journey. She had to hold onto his waist to keep her balance, and she was acutely aware of the warmth of his body through his shirt and the steady rhythm of his breathing. Republic was a small town, just one main street with a general store, a saloon, a church, a bank, and a handful of other buildings. Judge Morrison kept an office above the general store and served as both justice of the peace and the closest thing the town had to a lawyer. He was a portly man in his 50s with sharp eyes that missed nothing. He looked between Hannah and Yates with obvious curiosity when they appeared in his office. "Mrs. Miller," he said with a nod. "Mr. Olson, what can I do for you folks today?" "We want to get married," Yates said directly. "Today, if possible." Judge Morrison raised his eyebrows. "That is rather sudden, is it not? Mrs. Miller, your husband has not been gone long." 4 months, Hannah said, lifting her chin. "And this is my choice, Judge Morrison. I need help with the homestead, and Mr. Olson has offered to be my husband. We want to make it legal." The judge studied her face for a long moment, then turned his attention to Yates. "You are the fellow from the Running Creek Ranch, are you not? I have heard good things about you. Hard worker, no trouble. Why do you want to marry a widow with a struggling homestead?" "Because she is brave and strong and deserves better than to lose everything because she cannot work 40 acres alone," Yates said. "And because I think we can build a good life together." Judge Morrison grunted. "You know people will talk. They will say you are taking advantage of a vulnerable woman, or that she is being improper marrying again so soon." "Let them talk," Hannah said firmly. "I have no time to worry about gossip. I have a field to plant and a harvest to bring in." A smile tugged at the corner of the judge's mouth. "Well then, I suppose I should marry you before you change your minds." He pulled out the necessary papers. "I will need witnesses. Mrs. Cooper, who runs the general store, and her husband can serve if you like." 20 minutes later, Hannah stood in front of Judge Morrison with Yates beside her and the Coopers flanking them as witnesses. The judge read through the marriage ceremony quickly and efficiently, skipping the flourishes and getting straight to the heart of the matter. Do you, Yates Olson, take Hannah Miller to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part? I do, Yates said, his voice steady. And do you, Hannah Miller, take Yates Olson to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part? Hannah looked at Yates, at this near stranger she was binding herself to, and felt a strange calmness settle over her. This was the right choice. She knew it in her bones. I do, she said clearly. Then, by the power vested in me by the territory of Arizona, I pronounce you husband and wife. Judge Morrison closed his book. You may kiss the bride if you like. Yates looked at Hannah, a question in his eyes. She nodded slightly, and he leaned down to press a chaste kiss to her lips. It was brief and gentle, but Hannah felt something spark between them, a possibility of more. They signed the papers. Judge Morrison filed them officially, and just like that, Hannah was married for the second time in her life. Mrs. Olson now, no longer Mrs. Miller. Congratulations, Judge Morrison said, shaking both their hands. I hope you will be very happy together. They stopped at the general store so Yates could buy supplies. He purchased seed for planting, flour, sugar, coffee, beans, salt pork, and a few other necessities. He also bought Hannah a new pair of work gloves, sturdy leather ones that would actually protect her hands. You did not have to do that, Hannah said as he loaded everything onto his horse. Yes, I did, Yates replied. You are my wife now. Taking care of you is my job. The word wife still sounded strange to Hannah's ears. She had been a wife before, but this felt different. Everything about this felt different. They rode back to the homestead in comfortable silence. When they arrived, Yates unloaded the supplies while Hannah went inside to start preparing a meal. It was strange having someone else in the cabin, someone whose footsteps she did not recognize, and whose presence made the small space feel even smaller. She made biscuits and beans with some of the salt pork, simple food but filling. They ate at the small wooden table Samuel had built, and Hannah found herself sneaking glances at the man across from her, her husband. It still did not feel real. This is good, Yates said, finishing his second helping. You are a fine cook. It is just biscuits and beans, Hannah said. But the biscuits are light and the beans are seasoned well, Yates insisted. My mother always said you could tell a good cook by how they treated simple food. There was that mention of his mother again. Hannah found herself curious. Tell me about her, she said. About your family. Yates leaned back in his chair, his eyes going distant. My father was a farmer in Missouri. He had a good piece of land, grew corn and wheat. My mother was the daughter of the local minister, educated and refined. She read poetry and played the piano. I think farm life was harder for her than she expected, but she never complained. He paused, his fingers tracing patterns on the worn wood of the table. I had two younger sisters, twins named Mary and Martha. They were 6 years old when the fever came through. It took my father and my sisters in the same week. My mother and I survived, though looking back, I am not sure survival was the right word for what we did. Hannah reached across the table and touched his hand. I am so sorry. Yates turned his hand over and caught her fingers in his, holding gently. My mother tried to keep the farm going, but the bank foreclosed within a year. We lost everything. She took work as a seamstress in town, but the grief had broken something in her. She got pneumonia that winter and did not fight it. I think she was ready to join the rest of her family. What did you do? Hannah asked softly. I was 16 by then, big enough to pass for older. I headed west and found work as a ranch hand. I have been working cattle ever since, moving from ranch to ranch. The running creek has been good to me. The owner, Tom Hayes, is a fair man who treats his workers well. I have been there for 3 years now, saving most of my pay. Why did you stay if you were saving money? Hannah asked. Why not buy your own place? Yates looked at their joined hands. Because I was afraid, if I am honest. Afraid to put down roots again, afraid to care about something that could be taken away. Easier to stay a hired hand, to own nothing but my horse and my saddle. He looked up at her. Until I saw you fighting for your land, you reminded me what courage looks like. Hannah felt her throat tighten with emotion. I do not feel very courageous most of the time. The bravest people never do, Yates said. He squeezed her hand once and then released it. Now you mentioned separate beds. I can sleep in the barn if that would make you more comfortable. There is a small room off the back, Hannah said. Samuel was planning to use it for storage, but there is enough space for a cot. It is not much. It will be fine, Yates assured her. More than fine. They spent the rest of the afternoon setting up the small room for Yates. Hannah found an old cot frame in the barn, and Yates repaired the broken slats and strung rope across it to hold a mattress. She stuffed a mattress tick with fresh straw and sewed it closed, and they laid out blankets to make it comfortable. As the sun began to set, Yates went out to check on the animals while Hannah cleaned up from dinner. When he came back in, she was standing by the window, looking out at the freshly plowed field. "What are you thinking about?" Yates asked, coming to stand beside her. "I am thinking that yesterday I was alone and hopeless," Hannah said. "Today I am married to a stranger. Tomorrow we will plant the field together. It is a lot of change very quickly." "Do you regret it?" Yates asked quietly. Hannah turned to look at him, really look at him. In the fading light, his features were softer, and she could see the vulnerability in his expression. He was just as uncertain as she was, just as afraid this gamble might not pay off. "No," she said honestly. "I do not regret it, but I am frightened." "So am I," Yates admitted, "but I would rather be frightened and trying than safe and alone." Hannah smiled, a real smile that felt unfamiliar on her face. "When did you become so wise?" "I have had a lot of time to think while riding fence lines and herding cattle," Yates said. "Not much else to do out there but think." They stood together in companionable silence as darkness fell over the land. Finally, Hannah said, "I should get some rest. We have planting to do tomorrow." "Good night, Hannah," Yates said. "Good night, Yates," she replied. She went to the bedroom that had been hers and Samuel's, closing the door behind her. She could hear Yates moving around in the main room, then the sound of his door closing. She changed into her nightgown and crawled into bed, exhausted but too keyed up to sleep immediately. Her last thought before sleep finally claimed her was that for the first time in months, she did not feel completely alone. The next morning, Hannah woke to the smell of coffee brewing. She dressed quickly and came out to find Yates already up, the fire going and breakfast started. "I hope you do not mind," he said. "I am used to early hours." "Not at all," Hannah said, surprised and pleased. Samuel had never made breakfast in their entire marriage. That was woman's work in his mind. They ate quickly and headed out to the field. Yates had brought the seed they needed from town, and they worked side by side, Hannah making the holes and Yates dropping in the seeds and covering them. It was hard work but satisfying, and they developed a rhythm that made the task go faster. As they worked, they talked. Small things at first, safe topics like the weather and the quality of the soil. But gradually, the conversations deepened. Yates told her about the places he had been and the things he had seen. Hannah told him about growing up in Ohio, the youngest of 4 daughters, and how she had always dreamed of adventure beyond her small town. "Is that why you came west?" Yates asked. "Partly," Hannah admitted, "though I think I imagined it would be more glamorous than it turned out to be. The reality of frontier life is a lot harder than the stories make it sound." "Most things are," Yates agreed, "but there is beauty in it too if you know where to look." By midday, they had planted half the field. They took a break in the shade of the cabin, drinking cool water from the well and eating the sandwiches Hannah had prepared. "You are a hard worker," Yates observed, "keeping up with me all morning without complaint." "I have had practice these last few months," Hannah said wryly. "Struggling tends to build endurance." "You should not have had to struggle alone," Yates said. "Neighbors should have helped you." Hannah shrugged. "Most of them think a woman has no business trying to run a homestead. They figured I would fail eventually and they would be able to buy the land cheap. Why help me when my failure benefits them?" "That is a cold way to treat someone," Yates said, anger edging into his voice. "That is survival," Hannah corrected. "Out here, people look after their own interests first. I cannot blame them for that, even if I wish they had been kinder." They finished planting the field over the next 2 days. Hannah's body ached from the unaccustomed work, but it was a good ache, the kind that came from accomplishment rather than futile struggle. With Yates working beside her, the impossible task became merely difficult, and the difficult became manageable. On the 3rd night, they sat on the porch together after dinner, watching the stars come out in the vast Arizona sky. The night air was cool and pleasant after the heat of the day. "Tomorrow, I need to go to the Running Creek Ranch and tell Tom I will not be working there anymore," Yates said. "It is only right to give him notice in person." Hannah felt a twinge of anxiety. What if he is angry? What if he says you cannot leave? "He cannot stop me," Yates said. "I am a free man, not an indentured servant, but Tom is a good man. He will understand. Will you ask for your wages?" Hannah asked. "Do they owe you money?" "A bit," Yates said. "I have been there 3 years and I have pay coming. It is not a fortune, but it will help us get through until harvest." The next morning, Yates saddled his horse early. Hannah made him a good breakfast and packed food for his journey. "It is only 5 miles, Yates said, amused. "You should still eat," Hannah insisted. He took the package and tucked it into his saddlebag, then turned to her. They stood awkwardly for a moment, neither quite sure what the etiquette was for a husband leaving his wife of less than a week. Finally, Yates leaned down and kissed her forehead. "I will be back before dark," he promised. Hannah watched him ride away, and the homestead felt immediately emptier. She busied herself with chores, feeding the chickens, weeding the small vegetable garden, mending a shirt of Yates's that had a torn seam. It felt strange to be mending his clothes, intimate in a way their current relationship was not. Yates returned in the late afternoon, and Hannah was surprised by how glad she was to see him. He swung down from his horse with a smile on his face. "How did it go?" she asked. "Better than expected," Yates said. "Tom was happy for me, said it was about time I settled down. He paid me what he owed and gave me a bonus for good work. He also said if we ever need help with anything to come ask." "That was kind of him," Hannah said. "Tom is a good man," Yates repeated. "He also sent something for you." He reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a jar of honey and a small package wrapped in cloth. "His wife Laura sent the honey. The package is from the ranch hands. They took up a collection and bought you a wedding present." Hannah unwrapped the package to find a beautiful set of embroidered dish towels, clearly store-bought and not cheap. Tears stung her eyes at the unexpected kindness from people she had never met. "That is so thoughtful," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Word spread about our marriage," Yates said. "The men wanted to do something nice. They are a good crew." That night at dinner, Hannah said, "Tell me more about the ranch, about the people you worked with." Yates told her stories about the other cowboys, about the ornery cattle and the harsh winters and the roundups. He talked about sleeping under the stars and the loneliness of night watch and the camaraderie of the bunkhouse. Hannah listened, fascinated by this world she knew so little about. "Do you miss it?" she asked. "The life on the range?" Yates considered the question seriously. "Parts of it," he admitted. "I miss the freedom of it sometimes, the simplicity, but I do not miss the loneliness, and I am looking forward to building something permanent, something that will last." The weeks passed, and slowly Hannah and Yates settled into a routine. They worked the homestead together, repairing fences and tending the growing crops. Yates proved himself handy at everything from carpentry to animal husbandry. He fixed the sagging roof on the cabin and reinforced the chicken coop against predators. He gentled the cranky mule until the animal actually seemed to enjoy working. Hannah found herself relaxing around him, the constant tension she had carried for months finally easing. Yates was a quiet man, but when he spoke, he said things worth hearing. He had a dry sense of humor that surprised her, and he made her laugh more than she had in years. One evening about a month after their marriage, they were doing the dishes together when Hannah realized she was humming. She stopped abruptly, surprised at herself. "Don't stop," Yates said. "That was nice." "I did not even realize I was doing it," Hannah admitted. "You should do it more often," Yates said. "The cabin feels more like a home when there is music in it." Something in the way he said it made Hannah look at him more closely. He was watching her with an expression she was starting to recognize, warm and affectionate and maybe something more. "Yates," she said slowly, "are you happy here?" "Yes," he said without hesitation. "Happier than I have been in a very long time." "Are you?" Hannah thought about it, really examined her feelings. "Yes," she said, surprised by how true it was. "I am happy." That night, lying in bed alone as usual, Hannah found herself thinking about the wall she had built between them. Separate beds had made sense in the beginning when they were strangers. But they were not strangers anymore, were they? They were partners, friends even. And if she was honest with herself, she was starting to feel more than friendship for the man sleeping in the room down the hall. A few days later, they went into Republic for supplies. It was their first trip to town together since their wedding, and Hannah was nervous about the reception they would receive. But the storekeeper was friendly, congratulating them on their marriage. Mrs. Cooper pulled Hannah aside and gave her some advice about planting herbs, woman to woman. As they were loading supplies onto the wagon Yates had borrowed from Tom Hayes, they ran into the banker, Mr. Thornton. He was a thin man with calculating eyes, and Hannah had never liked him. "Mrs. Olson," he said, tipping his hat with exaggerated courtesy. "I heard you were married. How convenient, convenient." Hannah repeated, her back stiffening. "To find a husband right when you needed one to save your homestead," Thornton said. "Some might say too convenient. Some might say it smells of fraud." Yates stepped between Hannah and the banker, his voice dangerously quiet. "Some might say a lot of things, Mr. Thornton. But before they do, they should remember that slander is a serious charge. Mrs. Olson and I are legally married. Judge Morrison performed the ceremony. If you have accusations to make them officially or keep silent." Thornton's eyes narrowed. "I am just saying people notice things. People talk." "Let them talk," Yates said. "We have work to do. Good day, Mr. Thornton." He helped Hannah onto the wagon seat and climbed up beside her. They rode out of town in silence, but Hannah could feel the tension radiating from Yates. "I am sorry," she said finally. "I did not think about how our marriage might look to others." "I do not care how it looks," Yates said firmly. "We know the truth. We are building a life together, a real marriage, not some fraud to cheat the bank." "Are we?" Hannah asked quietly. Building a real marriage, Yates pulled the wagon to a stop and turned to look at her fully. What do you mean? I mean we live like roommates more than husband and wife, Hannah said, forcing herself to be brave. Separate beds, separate lives in many ways. Is that what you want? Is that enough for you? Yates was quiet for a long moment. I gave you space because I thought you needed it, he said finally. But no, it is not what I want. I want more, Hannah. I want a real marriage with you in every sense, but only if you want that too. Hannah felt her heart racing. I think I do, she said. I think I have wanted it for a while now, but was too scared to say so. What changed? Yates asked. I realized I was not scared of you, Hannah said. I was scared of caring about you and losing you. Like I lost Samuel, like you lost your family. But I am tired of being scared. Life is too short and too hard to spend it hiding from possibility. Yates reached over and took her hand. I am scared too, he admitted. Every day I wake up worried that something will go wrong, that this happiness will be taken away. But I would rather have this with you, even with the fear, than go back to being alone. They sat there on the wagon seat, holding hands and looking at each other with new understanding. Finally, Yates said, So what do we do now? We go home, Hannah said. And we start over. Not as strangers agreeing to a bargain, but as two people choosing each other. That night, after dinner, Hannah went to her bedroom and gathered up her nightclothes and personal items. She carried them to Yates's small room and set them down. Yates was sitting on his cot, pulling off his boots. He looked up in surprise when she entered. I thought, Hannah said, her voice not quite steady, that we could share this room if you want to. It is smaller than mine, but we would be together. Yates stood up slowly. Are you sure? He asked. Hannah nodded. I am sure. He crossed to her in 2 strides and cupped her face in his hands. I will be good to you, he promised. I will take care of you. I will. Hannah stopped his words with a kiss. It was different from the chaste kiss at their wedding, deeper and more honest. Yates made a sound low in his throat and pulled her closer, and Hannah felt a spark of something wonderful ignite between them. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Yates rested his forehead against hers. We should probably move to your room instead, he said, his voice husky. The bed is bigger. Hannah laughed, nervous and excited and happy all at once. Probably a good idea. They moved her things back to the larger bedroom, and this time Yates came with her. There was awkwardness at first, the natural uncertainty of two people learning each other. But there was also tenderness and care and a building passion that surprised them both. Later, lying in the darkness with Yates's arm around her and her head on his chest, Hannah felt a peace she had never known before. This was what marriage was supposed to be. Not duty or convenience, but genuine connection. I think I am falling in love with you, she whispered into the darkness. She felt Yates's chest rise and fall with a deep breath. I think I fell in love with you the first day I saw you, he said. Fighting that plow with bloody hands and refusing to quit, you took my breath away. Hannah tilted her head up to kiss his jaw. We are quite a pair, are not we? 2 stubborn fools trying to make a life in the middle of nowhere. The best kind of fools, Yates agreed. The crops grew through the hot Arizona summer, and so did the love between Hannah and Yates. They worked the land together, and now they slept in each other's arms each night. The homestead began to thrive under their combined efforts. Yates used some of his wages to buy a milk cow, and Hannah started selling butter and cheese in town. They planted a larger vegetable garden, and Hannah preserved everything she could for the coming winter. In late August, they harvested the wheat they had planted. It was hard work, cutting and binding and threshing, but when they were done, they had grain to sell and grain to keep. Yates took it to town and came back with money, real money that would pay off the bank and leave enough for supplies. Hannah cried when he showed her the payment receipt, tears of relief and joy. "We did it," she said. "We actually did it." "You did it," Yates corrected, pulling her close. "You fought to keep this land and you succeeded. I just helped." "You did more than help," Hannah said. "You saved me. You gave me hope when I had none." "No," Yates said firmly. "You saved yourself. You just let me be part of it." That night they celebrated with a special dinner, the first time they had allowed themselves to splurge. Hannah made a roast chicken with potatoes and carrots from their garden, and Yates surprised her with a bottle of wine he had secretly bought in town. "To us," he said, raising his glass. "To partnership and hard work and taking chances." "To us," Hannah echoed, clinking her glass against his. As summer turned to fall, Hannah began to notice changes in her body. She was tired more often, and her monthly courses had stopped. She suspected what it meant but was afraid to hope, afraid to say it out loud in case she was wrong. Finally, she gathered her courage and told Yates. They were sitting on the porch one evening, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. "I think I might be expecting a child," she said quietly. Yates went very still. Then he turned to her, his eyes wide. "Are you sure?" "Not completely," Hannah admitted. "But all the signs point to it." A slow smile spread across Yates's face, the kind of pure joy that transformed his usually serious expression. "A child," he breathed. "We are going to have a child." "Are you happy?" Hannah asked, suddenly anxious. They had never discussed children, never talked about what they wanted for the future beyond surviving the next season. "Happy does not begin to cover it," Yates said. He pulled her into his arms and held her tight. "A child, our child, a family." His voice broke on the last word, and Hannah realized he was crying. She held him while he wept, tears for the family he had lost and tears for the family they were building together. The pregnancy progressed through the fall and into winter. Yates was protective almost to the point of being overbearing, trying to keep Hannah from doing any heavy work. She had to remind him that she was pregnant, not fragile, and that women had been having babies and working their whole lives since the beginning of time. But his concern came from love, and she could not fault him for that. He took on more of the physical labor, insisting she rest when she needed it. He brought her things to make her comfortable and rubbed her swollen feet in the evenings without complaint. In December, they went into town to buy supplies for the winter. While they were there, they ran into Tom and Laura Hayes from the Running Creek Ranch. Laura was a kind woman in her 40s who greeted Hannah warmly. "I heard you were expecting," Laura said. "Congratulations, my dear. Do you have someone who will help you with the birth?" Hannah had not really thought about it. She had no family nearby and had not made close friends among the other homesteaders. "I suppose I will manage," she said. "Nonsense," Laura said firmly. "I have helped deliver more babies than I can count. When your time comes, have Yates fetch me. I will be there." "I could not ask you to do that," Hannah protested. "You are not asking, I am offering," Laura said. "Besides, Yates worked for us for 3 years. You are practically family." Hannah felt tears prick her eyes, the emotional volatility of pregnancy making her more sensitive than usual. "Thank you," she managed. "That is so kind." Christmas came, and Hannah and Yates spent it quietly at the homestead. They did not have much money for presents, but Yates had carved a beautiful cradle from wood he had traded for in town. Hannah had knitted tiny clothes from unraveled yarn, making booties and caps and a soft blanket. "Next Christmas we will have a baby to celebrate with," Yates said, running his hand over Hannah's swollen belly. "If I make it to Christmas," Hannah groaned, "I feel like I am the size of a house already." "You are beautiful," Yates said, kissing her forehead. "More beautiful every day." The baby came in early March of 1877, on a cool spring morning when the desert was just starting to bloom. Hannah's pain started before dawn, and Yates rode hard to fetch Laura Hayes. The kind woman arrived quickly, bringing her daughter Sarah to help. The labor was long and hard, as first labors often are. Laura stayed by Hannah's side the whole time, coaching her through the pains and offering encouragement. Yates paced outside, banned from the birthing room but close enough to hear. Finally, as the sun was setting, Hannah gave one last tremendous push and felt the baby slide free. There was a moment of terrifying silence, and then a loud, indignant cry filled the cabin. "It is a boy," Laura announced, laughing. "A healthy, angry boy with a fine set of lungs." She cleaned the baby and wrapped him in soft cloths, then placed him in Hannah's arms. Hannah looked down at her son, at his tiny red face and dark hair, and felt a love so fierce it took her breath away. "Let your husband in," Laura said to Sarah. "He should meet his son." Yates practically burst through the door, his face pale with worry. "Hannah, are you all right?" "I am fine," Hannah said, smiling despite her exhaustion. "Come meet your son." Yates approached slowly, almost reverently. He looked down at the baby in Hannah's arms, and tears started streaming down his face. "He is perfect," Yates whispered. "Absolutely perfect." "What should we name him?" Hannah asked. Yates thought for a moment. "James," he said, "after my father, if that is all right with you." "James Olson," Hannah said, trying it out. "I like it. Welcome to the world, James." The baby let out another cry, and they both laughed. Laura showed Hannah how to nurse, staying until she was sure both mother and baby were comfortable. Before she left, she squeezed Hannah's hand. "You did beautifully," Laura said. "You are stronger than you know." "Thank you," Hannah said, "for everything. I do not know what I would have done without you." "That is what women do," Laura said simply. "We help each other through. Now rest. You have earned it." After Laura and Sarah left, Yates carefully climbed into bed beside Hannah and their son. They lay there together, watching James sleep, marveling at the miracle of him. "I was so scared," Yates admitted quietly. "The whole time, all I could think was that I could not lose you. I could not survive losing you." "You did not lose me," Hannah said, leaning her head against his shoulder. "I am right here, we both are." "I know," Yates said. "But for a moment there, hearing you in pain and not being able to help, I understood why my father might have died of grief when he lost my mother and sisters. When you love someone this much, the thought of losing them is unbearable." "Then we will just have to take very good care of each other," Hannah said. "So neither of us has to know that pain." The months after James's birth were exhausting but joyful. The baby was healthy and strong, growing quickly on his mother's milk. Yates proved to be a devoted father, walking the floor with James when he fussed at night and singing him lullabies in a surprisingly pleasant voice. They worked the land that spring with James in a basket nearby, taking turns to tend to him while the other worked. It was harder than the year before, balancing the needs of a baby with the needs of the homestead, but they managed. One day in late May, they had a visit from Judge Morrison. He rode up to the cabin looking official and slightly uncomfortable. "Mr. and Mrs. Olson," he said, tipping his hat. "I hope I am not disturbing you." "Not at all, Judge," Yates said, coming out of the barn where he had been working. "What brings you out here?" "Bank business, I am afraid," the judge said. "Mr. Thornton asked me to ride out here and verify that your homestead is being properly worked. He is still convinced your marriage is fraudulent." Hannah felt anger flash hot in her chest. "That man will not let it rest, will he? He is a persistent fellow, I will give him that," Judge Morrison said. "But I can see with my own eyes that you folks are working this land together and building a life. The fields are planted, the buildings are maintained, and I hear you had a baby. Congratulations on that, by the way." "Thank you," Hannah said. "Would you like to come inside and see James?" "I would be honored," the judge said. They showed him the cabin, neat and well kept, and the baby sleeping peacefully in his cradle. Judge Morrison smiled at the sight. "Mr. Thornton is going to be disappointed," he said. "This is clearly a legitimate marriage and a thriving homestead. I will file a report saying as much, and hopefully that will be the end of his harassment." "We appreciate your fairness, Judge," Yates said. After the judge left, Hannah turned to Yates. "Do you think Thornton will finally leave us alone?" "I hope so," Yates said. "But if he does not, we will deal with it. We have dealt with everything else." That summer was their second on the homestead together, and it was easier than the first. They had learned the rhythms of the land and each other. The crops grew well, and they added 2 pigs to their livestock. Yates built a proper smokehouse so they could cure meat for the winter. James thrived, growing from a tiny infant into a sturdy baby who smiled and laughed and tried to grab everything in reach. Hannah loved watching Yates with their son, the gentleness with which he handled the baby, the patience he showed when James fussed. "You are a good father," she told him one evening as they sat together after putting James to bed. "I am trying to be," Yates said. "I want him to have everything I did not: security, a home that will not be taken away, parents who are there for him." "He has all that," Hannah assured him. "We built this together and no one can take it from us now." In August, they harvested their second crop. It was even better than the first, and the money they made allowed them to expand further. They bought more chickens and another cow, building their livestock slowly but steadily. One warm evening in September, they were sitting on the porch with James playing at their feet when Yates said, "I have been thinking." "About what?" Hannah asked. "About how much has changed in the last year and a half," Yates said. "When I rode past that first day and saw you struggling with the plow, I never could have imagined all this. This home, this life, this family." "Do you regret asking me to marry you?" Hannah asked, though she knew the answer. "Not for a single second," Yates said firmly. "It was the best decision I ever made. I just wonder sometimes if you regret saying yes." Hannah reached over and took his hand. "I regret nothing," she said. "That day changed my life. You changed my life. Before you came along, I was just surviving. Now I am living." Yates raised her hand to his lips and kissed it. "I love you, Hannah Olson, more than I have words to say." "I love you too," Hannah said, "more than I ever thought possible." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over their land, their son playing happily between them. This was what happiness looked like, Hannah thought. Not grand gestures or passionate declarations, but quiet moments of contentment with the person you loved. The years passed, each one building on the last. The homestead grew more prosperous, and so did their family. In 1879, Hannah gave birth to twin daughters they named Elizabeth and Emma. Yates joked that he now understood how his parents must have felt, overwhelmed by twins. In 1881, another son arrived, whom they named Samuel in memory of Hannah's first husband. It felt right to honor him somehow, to acknowledge that he had brought Hannah to this place, even if their marriage had not been what this one was. James grew into a sturdy boy who loved the land as much as his parents did. He followed Yates everywhere, learning to care for the animals and work the fields. The twins were wild and mischievous, keeping Hannah constantly busy but filling the cabin with laughter. Little Samuel was a quiet baby, content to watch the world with serious eyes. One evening in late 1882, when James was 5 and the twins were 3 and Samuel just 1, Hannah and Yates stood on their porch looking out at the homestead they had built together. The cabin had been expanded twice, now big enough to comfortably house their growing family. The barn was sturdy and well-maintained. The field stretched out, productive and profitable. They had paid off all their debts and even had savings. "We did it," Hannah said softly. "We really did it." You had doubts, Yates asked, amused. Sometimes, Hannah admitted. That first year especially. I kept waiting for something to go wrong, for disaster to strike. It seemed too good to be true. Life does not have to be hard all the time, Yates said. Sometimes things just work out. From inside the cabin came the sound of the children playing, James's voice rising above the twins' giggles. Hannah smiled. I never imagined I could be this happy, she said. Never thought it was possible. Yates pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her from behind. Neither did I. I thought I would spend my whole life drifting, never putting down roots, never risking my heart again. Then I saw you with that damned Plow and everything changed. Best Plow ever, Hannah said, laughing. Best decision ever stopping to help, Yates agreed. Even if I did propose marriage before I even knew your middle name. Which is Rose, by the way, Hannah said, in case you were still wondering. Hannah Rose Olson, Yates said, trying it out. Beautiful. They stood there as darkness fell, wrapped in each other's arms, listening to their children and feeling grateful for everything they had built. The path to this moment had not been easy. There had been hard times, crop failures, illness, and struggles. But they had faced everything together, partners in the truest sense. In 1885, their last child was born, another boy they named Thomas after Tom Hayes, who had become a dear friend and mentor. With 5 children, the homestead was constantly busy and loud, but Hannah would not have wanted it any other way. James was 8 now, old enough to be a real help around the homestead. He was responsible and hardworking, showing signs of becoming the kind of man his father was. The twins, at 6, were still wild but also developing distinct personalities. Elizabeth was bold and adventurous, while Emma was thoughtful and careful. Samuel, at 4, was the family diplomat, always trying to keep peace between his older siblings. And baby Thomas was content and easy, rarely fussing. One afternoon, Hannah was working in the garden while the children played nearby. She heard the sound of hoofbeats and looked up to see Mr. Thornton riding toward the homestead. She had not seen him in years, and her first instinct was concern. Yates came out of the barn, wiping his hands on a rag. He moved to stand beside Hannah, a protective presence. Mr. Olson, Mrs. Olson, Thornton said, dismounting. He looked older, thinner, somehow diminished. Mr. Thornton, Yates said neutrally, what can we do for you? I came to apologize, Thornton said, the words clearly difficult for him. I was wrong about you both. I thought your marriage was a fraud, a scheme to cheat the bank, but I can see now that I was mistaken. Hannah was too surprised to speak. Yates was the one who responded. Why tell us this now after all these years? Because I am dying, Thornton said bluntly. The doctor says I have maybe 6 months. I am trying to make amends for my mistakes before I go. He looked at Hannah. You have one of the most successful homesteads in the county. You have raised a beautiful family. You have proven everyone wrong who doubted you could make it. I should have seen that from the beginning instead of being so determined to prove you were failing. We appreciate your apology, Hannah said finally, and I am sorry to hear about your illness, Thornton nodded. I just wanted you to know, what you have built here, it is impressive. You should be proud. He remounted his horse with some difficulty. Good luck to you both. They watched him ride away, and Hannah felt a weight she had not realized she was carrying finally lift. Well, Yates said, that was unexpected. He is right about one thing, Hannah said. We should be proud of what we have built. She looked around at the thriving homestead, at their children playing safely in the yard, at the man beside her who had given her everything she needed to succeed. Pride was not a strong enough word for what she felt. Gratitude, love, contentment, joy, all of those and more. That evening, after the children were all in bed, Hannah and Yates sat on the porch as they had done so many times before. The stars were bright overhead, the night air cool and pleasant. "You ever think about that first day?" Hannah asked. "When you stopped to help with the plow?" "Sometimes," Yates admitted. "I think about how scared I was to propose, how certain I was that you would say no and send me away, how it felt like my whole life balanced on your answer." "I think about it too," Hannah said, "how desperate I was. How your offer seemed like either salvation or disaster, and I had no way to know which. How I took a leap of faith that could have gone so wrong." "But it did not go wrong," Yates said. "No," Hannah agreed. "It went more right than I ever dreamed possible." Yates turned to her, taking both her hands in his. "If I could go back and do it all again, I would not change a single thing, except maybe I would have stopped to help you sooner." Hannah laughed. "I am glad you stopped when you did. Any sooner and I might have been too proud to accept. Any later and I might have given up entirely. The timing was perfect." "Marry me tomorrow," Yates said suddenly, a mischievous glint in his eye. "Again. Let's renew our vows. Do it properly this time with our children there and all our friends. Celebrate what we have built." Hannah felt tears sting her eyes. "That is a beautiful idea." "Is that a yes?" Yates asked. "That is absolutely a yes," Hannah said. They held the ceremony 2 weeks later in Republic with Judge Morrison officiating again. Tom and Laura Hayes stood as their witnesses, and their 5 children clustered around them. This time there was no uncertainty, no hesitation. This time they knew exactly what they were promising each other. "Do you, Yates Olson, take Hannah to be your wife to love and cherish from this day forward?" Judge Morrison asked. "I do," Yates said, his voice strong and clear. "I always have and I always will." "And do you, Hannah Olson, take Yates to be your husband to love and cherish from this day forward?" "I do," Hannah said, smiling through happy tears, "with my whole heart." "Then I pronounce you husband and wife," Judge Morrison said with a warm smile. Again. Yates kissed Hannah while their children cheered and their friends applauded. It was perfect, a celebration of everything they had built together and a promise of everything still to come. The years continued to pass, bringing new challenges and new joys. The children grew, each developing their own personalities and dreams. James eventually took over much of the day-to-day running of the homestead, allowing Yates and Hannah to slow down a bit. The twins both married local boys and started families of their own nearby. Samuel showed an interest in becoming a teacher and went away to school for training. Thomas, the youngest, was determined to be a rancher like his father. In 1895, Hannah and Yates became grandparents for the first time when Elizabeth gave birth to a daughter. They were only in their early 40s, but felt blessed to see their family continuing to grow. One evening, as they sat on the porch that had seen so many important moments in their life together, Yates said, "Did I ever tell you that you are the bravest person I have ever known?" "You might have mentioned it once or twice," Hannah said, smiling. "Usually when I am doing something dangerous that you wish I would not do." "I am serious," Yates said. "You were brave that day with the plow, refusing to give up even when you were bleeding and exhausted. But you have been brave every day since. Brave enough to marry a stranger, brave enough to build a life from nothing, brave enough to let yourself love again." "You make it sound heroic," Hannah said, "but I was just doing what needed to be done." "That is what heroes do," Yates insisted. "They do what needs to be done even when they are scared." Hannah leaned against him, comfortable and content. "If I was brave, it was because you gave me the strength to be brave. You showed me I did not have to face everything alone." "We make a good team," Yates said. "The best team," Hannah agreed. They sat in silence, watching the sun set over the land they had worked together for nearly 20 years. The homestead was prosperous now, one of the most successful in the county. But more important than the material success was the love they had built, the family they had created, the life they had made together. "You remember what you said to me that first day?" Hannah asked. "After you finished plowing, marry me tomorrow," Yates quoted with a smile. "Pretty bold, looking back on it. Pretty perfect," Hannah corrected. "It was exactly what I needed to hear at exactly the right moment." "Lucky for both of us that you said yes," Yates said. "Lucky for both of us that you asked," Hannah replied. They continued to sit together as darkness fell, holding hands and watching the stars come out one by one. Inside the house, they could hear their youngest son getting ready for bed, and in the distance, they could see lights from their daughters' homes. This was their legacy, Hannah thought. Not just the land they had worked or the money they had saved, but the family they had raised and the love they had nurtured. It had started with a desperate woman and a compassionate cowboy, a plow and a proposal. It had grown into something more beautiful than either of them could have imagined. In the years that followed, Hannah and Yates continued to work the land together, though they gradually handed over more responsibilities to their children. They traveled a bit, visiting places they had always wanted to see. They spoiled their growing number of grandchildren and took pleasure in watching them grow. In 1905, they celebrated their 30th anniversary with all their children and grandchildren gathered around. It was a huge party, with food and music and laughter. At the end of the evening, when most of the guests had gone home and only family remained, James stood up to make a toast. "To my parents," he said, raising his glass, "who taught me what real love looks like. Who showed me that the strongest partnerships are built on trust and respect and mutual support. Who proved that you do not have to know someone your whole life to build a whole life together." "Hear, hear," everyone chorused, raising their glasses. Hannah looked around at the faces of her children and grandchildren, at the life she and Yates had built from nothing but hope and hard work. Her eyes found Yates across the room, and he smiled at her, that same warm smile that still made her heart flutter after all these years. Later that night, in the bedroom they had shared for 3 decades, Yates helped Hannah unpin her hair and brush it out like he had done countless times before. "Tired?" he asked. "A little," Hannah admitted, "but it was a wonderful day." "It was perfect," Yates agreed. He set down the brush and wrapped his arms around her. 30 years. I cannot believe it has been 30 years. "Feels like both forever and no time at all," Hannah said. "I would marry you all over again tomorrow if you asked me to," Yates said. Hannah laughed. "I think once was enough." "And then the renewal. We are properly married at this point." "Still," Yates insisted, "just so you know, if you ever want to renew again, I am ready." Hannah turned in his arms and kissed him. "I love you, Yates Olson, more today than yesterday and less than tomorrow." "I love you too, Hannah Rose Olson," Yates said. "Forever and always." They stayed in each other's arms, content and complete. Outside, the Arizona night was cool and still. The homestead they had built together stood solid and strong, a testament to what two people could accomplish when they chose each other against all odds. The years continued their march forward. Hannah and Yates grew older, their hair turning gray, their steps slowing. But their love never dimmed. If anything, it grew stronger, deepened by decades of shared experience and mutual support. In 1910, they were great-grandparents for the first time. Elizabeth's daughter had a son, and holding the tiny baby, Hannah marveled at the generations that had come from that single impulsive decision to marry a stranger. 4 generations, she said to Yates, who stood beside her looking down at the baby. "From you and me, 4 generations." "The first of many, I hope," Yates said. "You did good, Cowboy," Hannah said with a smile, "stopping to help that day." "You did good too," Yates replied, saying yes. As they moved into their 60s, they finally retired from active farming, leaving the homestead fully in James's capable hands. They built a smaller house near the original cabin, a cozy place just big enough for the two of them. They spent their days tending a small garden, visiting with their children and grandchildren, and simply enjoying each other's company. They had earned their rest, worked hard for decades, and now they could relax. One spring morning in 1916, 40 years after they had first met, Hannah and Yates walked out to the field where it had all begun. The field where she had struggled with the plow, where he had stopped to help, where he had proposed and she had accepted. "You ever regret it?" Hannah asked, though she knew the answer. "The life you gave up to be with me, you could have stayed a cowboy, stayed free and unattached." "That life was not freedom," Yates said firmly. "It was loneliness disguised as independence. This is freedom, choosing to be with you every day. Building something that matters. That is what real freedom looks like." Hannah smiled and took his hand. They were both in their 60s now, their faces lined with age and sun, their bodies not as strong as they once were, but their love was still there, still burning bright. "Marry me tomorrow," Yates said suddenly, echoing those words from so long ago. "We are already married, you silly man," Hannah laughed. "I know," Yates said, "but I would marry you again and again if I could. Every day, every moment. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Hannah Olson." "And you are the best thing that ever happened to me," Hannah said. "Even if you did propose after knowing me for barely a few hours." "Especially because of that," Yates said. "Because I saw you and I knew some things you just know." They stood in the field where their life together had begun, holding hands and remembering. The land stretched out around them, productive and beautiful. In the distance, they could see their children's homes, see smoke rising from chimneys and hear the faint sounds of their grandchildren playing. "We built something good here," Hannah said. "We built something great," Yates corrected. As the sun rose higher, warming the Arizona morning, Hannah and Yates walked slowly back to their small house, arms around each other, still as in love as they had been 40 years ago. Perhaps more in love, deepened by time and trial and triumph. They lived many more years together, growing old side by side. When Yates passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 79, Hannah grieved deeply but also felt grateful. Grateful for every year, every day, every moment they had shared. Grateful that he had stopped to help her all those years ago. Grateful that she had been brave enough to say yes. She lived for 5 more years after Yates died, surrounded by the family they had built together. She told stories to her great-grandchildren about the cowboy who had proposed marriage after knowing her for barely a day, about the homestead they had built from nothing, about the love that had sustained them through everything. When Hannah passed away peacefully at the age of 84, she was buried beside Yates on a hill overlooking the homestead they had built together. Their graves were marked with simple stones that bore their names and the dates of their lives, but the real memorial was all around them. The thriving homestead, now run by their grandson. The town of Republic that had grown and prospered. The generations of family who carried their legacy forward. At Hannah's funeral, James, now an old man himself, stood up to speak about his parents. His voice was thick with emotion as he told the story of how they had met, how his father had finished plowing a field and proposed marriage to a woman he barely knew. "It sounds crazy when you tell it like that," James said. "A stranger proposing marriage after a few hours. But my father saw something in my mother that day. He saw her courage, her determination, her strength, and my mother saw something in him too. She saw kindness and compassion and the possibility of partnership. They took a chance on each other, and from that chance they built a love that lasted a lifetime." He paused, looking around at the many faces gathered there. Children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, great-great-grandchildren. All of them stemming from that single impulsive decision made on a hot Arizona day in 1876. They taught us what love really means, James continued. Not just romance or passion, though they had plenty of both, but partnership, mutual respect, choosing each other every day, even when it is hard. Especially when it is hard. That is the legacy they left us, and it is worth more than any amount of land or money. As the service concluded and the family gathered for a meal in honor of Hannah, the stories flowed freely. Stories of Hannah's determination and Yates's kindness. Stories of how they had worked the land together and raised their family. Stories of the love that had been the foundation of everything they built. The homestead continued to thrive, passed down through the generations. The original cabin was preserved as a reminder of where it all started, and family members would sometimes visit it, sitting on the old porch and imagining what it must have been like that day when everything changed. The story of Hannah and Yates became family legend, told and retold to each new generation. It became a reminder that sometimes the best things in life come from taking chances, from being brave enough to say yes when opportunity presents itself, from choosing love even when it seems impractical or impossible. Years turned into decades, and decades into a century. The homestead still stood, though it had changed and grown over the years. But the love that had built it, the partnership that had sustained it, that remained constant. Hannah and Yates's great-great-great-grandchildren still worked the land, still told the story of the woman who struggled with a plow and the cowboy who finished it and said, "Marry me tomorrow." And always, when they told the story, they emphasized the most important part. Not the impulsiveness of the proposal or the desperation of Hannah's situation, but the choice they both made to build something together, to take a chance on love, to believe that sometimes, even in the hardest circumstances, hope and partnership can create something beautiful. The land remained, solid and enduring beneath the Arizona sun. The family remained, growing and thriving through the generations. And the love remained, echoing through time, a reminder that the greatest adventures often begin with the simplest acts of kindness and the bravest leaps of faith. Hannah and Yates's story became more than just a family tale. It became a piece of local history, a reminder of what the pioneers had built and the risks they had taken. It was a love story for the ages. Proof that real romance was not about grand gestures or perfect timing, but about two people choosing each other and working together to build a life worth living. And it all started with a woman struggling to plow her field alone, a cowboy who stopped to help, and 4 words that changed everything. "Marry me tomorrow."